Hello, everyone. Welcome to YAS, your African Supply Chain Podcast. I am your host, Stella Jaqueta. And in this podcast, we discuss various topics that affect my beautiful, your beautiful, uncomplicated African supply chains. And in this episode, we will be talking about empowering women in supply chain. And I know it's a month late, but I still wanted to celebrate all the women, especially those in supply chain, who are contributing to making this industry work. And to help me celebrate, I have a wonderful guest. And I first heard her at ASCA conference talking about the wonderful work that her company Fix the Chain is doing at empowering women in emerging African markets. So let me introduce you guys to Tzippora Nusbaum. And let me tell a little bit about Tzippora. Is a laser-focused social entrepreneur dedicated to social equity worldwide. She's the founder of two social enterprises, Fix the Chain and Pocket Teacher. Fix the Chain empowers women across Africa to lift themselves and their communities out of extreme poverty by teaching them the business of mushroom growth and connecting them to local and international markets. Pocket Teacher promotes equity and social mobility by offering high school students high-quality educational material online free of charge. In addition to managing her business, Tzippora works to spread awareness regarding social business and their strong potential so that change makers across society can make sustainable, lasting impact worldwide. So I'm excited to have you. Welcome to
I'm
YAS.
excited to be here.
How are you
Thank
doing?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be here. It's a very exciting platform to be part of. And it's never too late to celebrate International Women's Day and International Women's Month.
Exactly. Thank you, Tzippora. And just to get started, can you please tell the story of Fix the Chain? How did you came about with this business?
For sure. Fix the Chain is a social business. What that means is that we are a business like any other, except that we are here to make impacts. We are here to make change. And the way that we are going about our change in our little corner of the world is by fighting extreme poverty across mainly Central Africa. And we are connecting women who generally don't have the opportunity with really large national, local, and international markets. And we come in, we help them learn how to grow mushrooms, support them along their journey, and then help them to make a sale. And at the end of the day, it's just business.
At the end of the day, it's just business, you know? And
Yeah.
I was thinking, can you please tell us, because sometimes, as you said, it's just business, but why did you differentiate with being a social enterprise? And could you tell us the difference between a social enterprise and an NGO? Is it the same or with a different name? Is it completely different? Can you just make it clear so that people, for those who did not yet get it, what is a social enterprise and how it differs with an NGO?
For sure. And I'm glad you asked because this is very near and dear to my heart. Social enterprises are not NGOs. There's a lot of room for collaboration. So I have a lot of respect for NGOs and the work they do, much like I have a lot of respect for government and I have a lot of respect for corporate, and we each have our place in the world and we each have our job to do. Social business is an entity in and of itself. And what we are is a business. We are for profit without question. Unlike an NGO, which is a non-for-profit by definition, we aim to make a profit. However, a typical business, small, medium, corporate, whatever it may be, they first and foremost make all their decisions based on their bottom line, based on profit. And a social business makes all of our decisions based on impact. So we first come to make impact, and afterwards we say, how can we make a profit while making impact? Whereas the comparison would not be to an NGO, it would be to a business who says, first we need to make a profit. Now, how can we do good within the realms of making a profit? So our priorities are switched. And while it sounds like a minor difference, it changes everything, because every decision we will ever make will be first and foremost, how can we make the change that we have come to make? And only afterwards, okay, now let's make sure that our bottom line is still positive.
Yeah. And Tzippora, I like what you said. You started this as with the impact, or the focus is really to impact and then making a profit out of it. And I just want to understand, Tzippora, what really led you to that decision that I want to build a social enterprise. What took you to that decision, really? Did you just wake up one day out of the blue and you're like, I want to build a social enterprise?
No.
Because you worked on and you deliberated. And so how did you came to that decision?
What I always knew was that I wanted to make impact. And the exploration was how to do that and how to do that most correctly. My statement was, I want to make change. Not, I want to open an NGO or open a business. The avenue through which the change happened was completely irrelevant, but the purpose of what I was doing was to make this change. And in doing quite a bit of research in the process of discovering how and what's the most practical and smartest and most efficient and effective way to make the change that I was trying to make, based on my criteria that I had kind of laid out, social business was very much the only option. And I think that if we're going to, take these few minutes to describe the difference, I think it may be wise to point out what everyone's role is to play, because you do need everyone.
Yeah.
For example, I think the easiest one is government. It's quite clear that if government isn't in place, nobody can be doing anything. I cannot function as a social business without some set of governance, without laws, rules, without standards. So it's easy to see how any impact I make requires that government body. And in the same manner, I require businesses. I require just regular old small businesses, corporates. They're my partners, because I have come to do business with the women that I serve. But in order to do business, I need clients. I need people to whom I can sell. They need markets. So we're all part of this supply chain, which is how it ties in so well with our conversation today. The supply chain is made up of businesses. So without proper profit-focused businesses, none of this machine would be making any progress. So there's no question that while I am a social business, I very much require those other players, even, so to speak, the bad guys, the massive corporates that many people who are in the social, people love to protest against them and point out all the bad things they do, but they have the power to do immense good as well. And they have the funds to back things that no one else can. So when Nestle says we are going to take a stab at climate change, they can do that in a way that no one else can. So they are partners with extreme potential, and they have their part to play. And the same goes with NGOs. An NGO comes in and they have the capability to prioritize projects that others can't, because they have that nonprofit focus. So we all really need to recognize where we shine, recognize where the other one shines, and then learn to collaborate extensively and respectfully to really make the most out of the entire system. And that's what I found really does work best, is very much in the supply chain mindset, is when we all find our place and work together to create a very smooth overall service to both ends, really. We want to be able to get the customers what they want, how they want it, and in a responsible manner. And we want to be able to pay a fair wage to everyone along the way, from farm to plate. And that requires everybody.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And as you were describing, it's everyone has a role to play. And from what I caught from your description is that you guys are standing in the middle. You have the women that you're empowering, right? From the different farms, from the different small businesses, and you standing in the gap as well, connecting them to the international, to the local markets as well. So at the end of the day, you're making an impact, but also you're still being profitable in the way.
It's exactly what it is. And that's also why, for the purposes that I have come to do, why I have to be a business and I cannot be an NGO. Because when I approach the farmers and when I approach these women that we've come to empower, if I would say to them, here's a gift, grow mushrooms, but all the liability is my own. I
Yeah.
mean, anyone who's ever done any project anywhere with anyone recognizes that that is a project that's doomed for failure. Whereas if you approach a woman and you say, hey, would you like to open a mushroom farm? It'll be yours. You're responsible. It's your risk. It's your investment and it's your profit, but I'll buy. And I'm really happy to do everything in my power to help you succeed. And what we've done at Fix the Chain specifically is we designed the business in such a way that our success is contingent upon the success and the empowerment of the women. If they are not creating successful, lucrative farms, I don't have mushrooms to sell onward. So the business is structured in such a way that they have to succeed for me to succeed. And I need to succeed for them. So we're all very much invested in each other. And it's a bit of a fail-safe. We have to keep our eye on the ball, because if we ever stop, then everybody fails.
Exactly. And Tzippora, just going into a little bit about Fix the Chain, why did you guys decide to go in the business of mushroom? Or is there something specific about it? How did you came to that decision?
So that it's very specific, and I get that. And that's always the first question that people ask, like, really? Mushrooms? And the answer is specifically mushrooms. So when creating this impact driven business and kind of the goal is always so heavily sitting kind of in front of me, what that did is that the business kind of created its, because I came and said, all right, I'd like to make the biggest impact possible. Right. And I started doing a decent amount of research to see how does one make this impact. That very quickly led to focusing on women, which just in a nutshell is, if you want to make real lasting change, specifically in the world of poverty in many areas, but we'll leave that for a different day. But if you want to make real lasting change, statistically speaking, when you empower a woman, you empower her family. And when you empower her family, you empower the community and the next generation. So when you're looking to have intergenerational graduation from poverty, which is what it's called, where slowly the entire area kind of climbs its way out until they are genuinely no longer definable as an extremely impoverished area, you have to focus on women, because she will immediately take that financial gain and invest it in her children, which means within 10, 15 years, you suddenly have education that you didn't have. You have a university degree, you have healthcare, you have decreased deaths and increased nutrition. All of these things happen within no time. And that is, statistically speaking, the result of investing in women. I am obviously not saying that if one invests in a man, none of that will happen. But if you are going to look at the statistics of it, you will have a stronger, more noticeable, and much faster result by investing in women. So women was a given. Agriculture was a given, because once you're in these areas, a huge portion of the population in one way or another is already working in agriculture. So again, as we're looking at this, how do I make the impact? The business began structuring itself. Whatever it was, as I'm building, whatever it is that I will be doing, it will focus on women and it will focus on agriculture. And then through the research, I discovered the world of mushroom growth. And when you look at the requirements and the nuances of growing mushrooms, they are naturally, intrinsically, perfectly tailored for all of what women in marginalized, potentially discriminated situations need. In the sense that mushrooms grow indoors, they don't require land ownership. So a woman who, for example, is, whether by force, she may not have freedom of movement in a really extreme situation, or she just doesn't own land because it's just less practical. She's extraordinarily poor. Whatever it may be, she doesn't need to own land. We grow them inside. We grow them in buckets and in bags hanging from ceiling. So we have a great potential to have huge amounts of yield on very, very small spaces because we're doing vertical farming. The crop is year round. So she's not tied to climate change. She's a little bit immune to all of these slight extreme temperatures, which is something we see deeply linked with poverty. It doesn't require electricity. It doesn't require really extreme labor, so that even women in all stages of life, we even have groups that are handicapped that are able to take part in our trainings. So no matter how you look at it, the mushrooms are just perfectly tailor-made for these women in these really, really disadvantaged situations. It's a circular agriculture and it's a circular finance project. So the entire thing is just so elegant. It's really a word for it. So that's why we use the mushrooms, because it works too well to pass up the opportunity.
Perfectly. And Tzippora, with all of that, I believe there's certain challenges that you had to face initially, or you're still facing with connecting these women with the local markets, with the international market, not even talking about the logistics of it, exporting the mushrooms, distributing local, financing. So can you please tell and share with us what are some of the challenges that you have to overcome during this process?
Absolutely. There are quite a few. So first of all, you're right. I would say by far the number one challenge is market. There's no question, because it's setting up a farm is easy. Relatively speaking, it's quite inexpensive. You need some funds, obviously, but it's not a hard thing to train and to learn and to set up your own farm. Selling, that's where things get really tricky, as we all know. So the challenge, there are multiple aspects to this challenge. First of all, our goal is to pay fair, livable, strong wages to the women, which means that I'm expensive. By definition, my product will always very proudly be expensive. And that's hard. It's a hard sale. But the world is no longer sitting with, blinds around its eyes, pretending that these problems don't exist. So when you find the right customer, not only is it no longer a hard sale, what it actually is I'm the solution you've been looking for. So it's a huge challenge, but the effort, rather than putting our effort into making a hard sale, we put our effort into targeted customer location, locating the customers and finding people that when we find each other, we are each other's solution. They have been looking for me just as much as I have been looking for them. And so it's obviously quite a bit of work, and the path to there is rarely smooth. And like you're saying, and then there's logistics, because if I happen to find that customer in America and we're growing out of Ghana, that sentence encompasses a lot. But it's how it has to be. And there are ways to kind of try and circumvent as much as possible some of the logistical difficulties. But at the end of the day, that's how the supply chain should be. And it should function as we pay fair wages. And I would never apologize for that. The opposite. It's the banner under which I stand. So
I can imagine connecting with all these different markets as well. It's astronomical that you go through, even locally. And then like what you said, it's finding the right partner, not everyone is for you. It's really about finding that one that really appreciates the value that you bring, the product that you bring, and they appreciate it that as well. You're doing impact business. You want to pay fair wages. It's not just about exploiting, but it's about finding the right partners.
It is. And I should correct my own phraseology. I'm not paying wages whatsoever, actually, because and I believe this so very strongly.
Mm.
I'm paying prices. These are independent farmers, and the farm is theirs. And I say wages just because that's the phrase that's thrown around, and it's on the tip of my tongue, but it's paying fair prices for a produce that they deserve 100% of the profits. And
Exactly. Yes. And also, Tzippora, well, being that you are from a different culture, you are from a different country as well. You're an Israelite woman.
yes.
So how when you started to fix the chain now in an African country, what cultural shocks did you really found and you had to deal with? Because I believe that's bound to happen. So, like, what
Yes.
cultural shocks did you had to with starting?
Yes. Yes, it is bound to happen. So, the truth is that there weren't culture shocks, so to speak, because it was more culture experiences. Because part of the basis of everything I do is this deep, deep respect. I'm not coming and saying, I come from the Western culture and let me bring you my Western culture and show you my ways. We've tried that and it did not work. I think everybody can agree that was a failed one.
Yeah.
So rather than doing that, because that's just completely and deeply inappropriate, the entire experience was a much more humble and much more exciting and respectful. Hi. Hi, let's work together. And I can't wait to meet you. And I'm really happy to show you how I work. So then it wasn't a culture shock because there weren't expectations. I didn't come in expecting Western culture because it isn't. And I came in just open-eyed and curious. I wonder what this very different experience is going to be
bring.
Yeah, exactly. And that led to a lot of room for some very interesting conversations where, there would be a woman where I would write something and she would, write something back and I would say, oh, we need to hold on. Where I come from, when one says this sentence, that means X. I'm pretty sure you mean something totally different and we need to pause and we need to translate and then we can move forward. And there was just a ton of, but it's never accusatory. It's always exploring together and just kind of let's learn how the other one meets and the timing is always a great example how timing, when one sets a meeting in Israel, if you are 60 seconds late, then you open and oh my God, I'm so sorry and so apologetic. Africa is not quite the same. One sets a meeting, like if I show up today, then we will all say thank you and move on.
We'll move on.
Exactly. And I used to panicking. I'm, oh my God, the meeting started 30 seconds ago. And come panicking, running in and turn on the camera and nobody's there.
What is there?
30 minutes. 30 minutes later, they come waltzing in and it's like
nothing happened.
It was, and everyone came waltzing in 30 minutes later. And then you learn, okay, I guess. And now it's great because I'd rather work that way than with all of the stress being on. So it's fun and it's different and it's constantly learning. And what's great about my business specifically is I'm constantly going to new areas, kind of by definition, because once we've set up here, now let's expand and make impact elsewhere. And so and there's such drastic differences based on the different areas where I'm working. So it's just a never ending exposure to so many new cultures. And it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I can feel it even the energy, the way you speak. And I see that it's such an enjoyable process for you, learning new cultures, adapting to them. Because again, we're not all the same, We can be, I'm in Mozambique and you're in Israel, but we can communicate, we can understand each other. I think that's the beauty that comes with cultural knowledge and understanding and the respect that you said and being humble about it, that we can learn, we can do business together and we can learn and extend grace to each other, I can say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's crucial. I mean,
Yeah.
I always say this, and I really, really stand behind it. If if somebody would come in from halfway across the world and just kind of one day show up in my neighborhood, sit all of us down and say, all right, from here on out, this is how you're educating your children, I would be really angry.
Yeah,
Who are
exactly.
you? And what say do you have in my life? And so I know how much I respect the knowledge that I have of my culture and
Mm.
how completely out of place a foreigner would be is they came for the purpose of making change. If a foreigner comes to the community and says, hey, I'm new here. Do you want to have a meal together? Oh my God, move into my house
Yeah. Yeah.
and let's become friends. But no one ever has the right to impose themselves and their culture on others. And so there's just this very, very deep and profound respect that I have for the places I'm the foreigner. No one else
Mm.
is. That's me.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's quite a new experience. And I like that you said with each new experience, each new place that you go, you're getting to learn more and more about the other cultures. And I think one thing that I've always got triggered is when like they box Africa in one. It's just like one, as if it's one country, but it's
Yes.
full of different cultures and language, thousands of languages. And the fact that you're in Tanzania, you can't relate the same way with Ghanaian. The fact that you're in Mozambique, it's not the same way that you're going to relate with Egyptians. So it's completely different, and we have different cultures. We are in the same continent, but we carry different identities, I can say, and different ways of doing business as well. And now, for with Fix the Chain, I saw that it's addressing three sustainable goals, development goals, namely ending extreme poverty, addressing gender inequality, and fighting climate change. And I'm particularly curious, and I know that you spoke a little bit more on how the mushrooms as well, they are very climate friendly, I can say, produce. But I want to a little bit go more on that and how you are really ensuring that you are fighting climate change with Fix the Chain.
Absolutely. The truth is actually we hit 10 SDGs,
Oh.
which was totally unintentional, if I would be completely honest about it. I mean, we started out aiming to hit no poverty with an eye on a climate. And then when the business was fully structured and someone just kind of asked, hey, which SDGs? And when I really read through them one by one, and I just kept like, oh my God, also that one. Oh, wow, look, also that. So,
Like,
which is really cool. And
yeah.
I'm very, very proud of that statement because I think what it says is two very, very, very strong statements. One, we're genuinely holistic. If we first built the business and then looked at the SDGs because we thought we were only following one and we see how many we hit, then I quite proudly say that we did a good job recognizing the intricacies of the system and recognizing that you can't target one and kind of ignore the others. So climate is very much one of them. And I think it's a great question. And we touched on it earlier, but I'm very happy to elaborate that first of all, it must be said that climate change and poverty really go hand in hand because what we see, and I assume that most of your listeners know this, but just on the off chance that somebody is unfamiliar, two things happen. The less the less empowered financially an area is, then the less potential they have to protect themselves in the case of extreme climate, right? So that when, for example, it can be as simple as a prediction, a weather prediction. In a very rich country, they have a lot of private companies making extraordinarily exact weather predictions down to the street. This is where the flooding is going to be most. Yes. I was only just learning about this like really recently, that there are private companies that can monetize on the satellite, and not only satellite, there's 4 or 5 different ways that they can predict it, and it's expensive. So the more money you have, the more prepared you are. Forget everything else. Before we've even started with the actual climate happening, we're already at a disadvantage because we are deeply, deeply non-prepared. We don't have any area-specific information. There are some areas that even in real time still are slightly lacking, let alone predictions. So there's a deep disadvantage before we've even gotten started. Once the climate change is happening, first of all, geographically speaking, from an international perspective, a lot of the really extreme change is happening in the MENA region, which means some of the poorest countries are also those feeling the strongest changes. Which is obviously deeply, deeply unfortunate. And they're also the least adaptable because they don't have this financial buffer to make change. They're not mobile. They don't have money. They don't have, that spare cash for a rainy day, quite literally. So every aspect that you look at it chronologically, graphically, wherever you look at these communities, they are deeply, deeply disadvantaged when it comes to climate change. And then the response also is inadequate because we don't have the funding, just like we didn't have the funding in the first place. Yeah. So climate and poverty go together extraordinarily deeply. And tying it back into women, wherever you see these type of issues, women tend to be disproportionately disadvantaged. Again, the men, let's say, have fertilizer, where women very often don't. So the men's fields are just stronger. They're more resilient. The men have manpower. So as they do know that something is coming, they can prepare. They can fix it in retrospect. The women are very often really left to their own resources, not to mention the other duties that they have, the children that they're taking care of. This being torn between, do I save the business or do I save my family? The women have such a burden on them. If it does lead, if it leads to extreme malnutrition, if it leads to a lack of food, statistically speaking, internationally, whenever there isn't food, the woman will always be the last to eat. She will always feed everyone in her family and herself last. Again, statistically speaking, and by and large, and I would never point at a single woman or man and accuse them or applaud them without knowing their situation. But statistics are very, very strong. So the issues I have come to target and climate issues cannot be separated on any level. So with that said, whatever I do must be extraordinarily climate aware. And so that's why what we do is we try and reduce climate harm as much as possible. Wherever possible, we find the most damaging agricultural waste in that area. We try and keep it local, both from a climate and a financial perspective. You don't want to have too much traveling and transportation. Once we've grown the mushrooms, and the mushrooms are, we have this waste product, the byproduct of the mushroom growth when we're ready to start afresh and do a new batch. Now our byproduct is a fertilizer that we can then reinvest in the soil, in the area, and in the women, and in the community. So we're making, we're fixing the problems. We're making their agricultural techniques more climate change resilient. And all of this, we don't use fertilizers, we don't use chemicals. Mushrooms grow without any of problematic harm. Yes, plus we're not climate dependent. So that should there be a sudden drought, as long as we can get our hands on water, we don't need it to be rainwater. It takes only 2.5 liters of water per kilo of fresh mushrooms, which when you compare that to other fields of agriculture is nothing. So we're using very little water. We're not dependent on rain. We can be grown year round. We have a lot of buffer for these sudden extreme climate conditions. So we set up the farm so that if there's minor flooding, it doesn't affect us. We set up the farm so there's a bit of a heat wave, doesn't affect us. So we've really managed to buffer the women from climate change while empowering them to be a little bit more ready for these disasters as they come. And they're growing food. So if we are in an area that's facing drought, we're also producing a very high nutrient product that they can say, forget selling it, I'm going to feed it to my children. And that's an option too. So we're very, very, very deeply intertwined with everything climate out of this mission to solve poverty, which is kind of impressive how that happens to work.
It is very impressive, like what you just explained and how it really, it comes into a very full circle. Like it doesn't matter whatever season they can find themselves in, it will continually be producing, saving water, which is currently it's a crisis in many countries as well. And for example, here in Mozambique, we suffer like particularly end of the year till like up until March. There's like floods. So, and what you explained exactly in terms of that example of some of the developed countries, they can predict exactly where it will hit. That for me just hit home. Sometimes it's access to information that when you don't have the resources, sometimes you just suffer because you just don't know where to find the proper information, which is quite expensive as well. And if you're
Yes.
empowering the community, if you're empowering the women, to have the power of decision, imagine where we can go from there on. So it's
And
quite.
and it's extremely true. And that's also why there's so much respect for the communities and the work that we do. Because, for example, as the community becomes richer, they would never know if they would invest in a bridge because what they have everything they need right across this river, but we can't
Yeah,
cross it because
yeah,
so maybe their most important thing is a bridge, whereas maybe another one would say, forget that. We're going to buy in to this really expensive weather prediction because we suffer from floods. We don't need a bridge. And another one says the clinic is, 7 hours away and no one can get,
away.
and each community knows themselves better than anyone else. And so if by empowering them, that's when the real change happens because they know what they need and all they need is the access to it. And if we can just give them even a small boost in finances, and our goal is to give them much more than a small boost. But if we can give them this small boost in finances, then that's all the access they need and they can really take it from there.
Yeah, and become sustainable to do it, to make it a profitable business. And Zipporah,
Absolutely.
now getting towards the end, I want you to leave a word of advice to women who want to start their own business, especially in industries which are dominated by men. And I'm pretty sure that you've seen so many examples of women who started and they were a bit reluctant. So, what advice can you give to women who want to start their business and how can they thrive?
That's a great question. I mean, it's easy to say and it's hard to do. So sometimes it's a bit of a problematic question, but I mean, for what it's worth, I think that we need as women, we need to believe in ourselves before anything else. And that's hard to do because ever since we were born, and I say this about myself as much as I say this about others, and it only gets more extreme when you hit these other cultures. But there is a built-in hierarchy that we all experience. There's no question about it. It's easy to understand how the world came to be that way. It's easy to be forgiving and say, okay, I get how men are physically bigger and physically stronger. So it begs the hierarchy because they can 9 out of 10 times physically overcome any one of us. And that leads to and even in a very Western business world,
Yeah.
a woman physically is the one having the baby, which means she is going to be out of the office for X amount of her career because she just had a baby. Meaning there are certain built differences that I understand how we got here. Understanding that it's an inherent difference, but not a weakness, I think is the first step for us to say, hell, I just had a baby. I'm not apologizing for that. That makes me the strongest thing in the world. And for each, and that's an example, but for the first step, I think, is for each one of us to look inwards and say, society has a problem, but I don't. And I can be as strong as I choose to be. And I think that's the first step. And I think the second step, because society, we're not going to wake up tomorrow and it will be different. That'd be great. But it's taking its time. I think we have to work with each other. And I think the most empowering thing that a woman can do is look next to her and say, we're in it together. And let me hold your hand and I'll pick you up and you pick me up. And then we do it as well. And the stronger we become, the more we encourage each other, we become a force to be reckoned with. And I don't say that because it's a call to war. I say it because if we don't believe in ourselves, how can we expect someone else to believe in us? And we are doing it, and we're doing it well. But I say this as a reminder to those who are earlier on in the journey. And those who are still, I don't know, but what if, but I don't know if I deserve it. Try. What's the worst that happens? If you fail, you'll be right where you are now anyway. And if you see that she's right next to you and she's kind of hesitating, encourage her to try as well. And after we all do it together, then we have to be part of what's equality and equity worldwide, because we're already there and we're jumping into the game without really asking permission. So I think that would be my biggest word of advice is believe in yourself. And if you see others who need that, believe in them too.
Yeah, thank you, Tzippora. Even what you just said right now, do it. What's the worst that it can happen? And for me, just to share my example with starting the podcast, it was really do it. Just do something, just do it. Instead of just sitting down and be like, do I have an experience? Can I talk about it? Can I all of these are thoughts that are just limiting you. What's the worst that can happen, really, But if you start, you at least, if something goes wrong, at least you learn something new,
Yeah.
Yeah, at least
and you will.
Yes. And if you win, and you learn, it's at the end of the day, you will always gain something out of the experience. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tzippora. And how can people reach out to you if they want to know a little bit more about Fix the Chain? So Pocket Teacher that you also have, how can they get in touch with you?
The best way is probably either through the website, I would say, or through LinkedIn is just the easiest, most international way to be in touch. The website is Fix the Chain, but hyphenated. So I assume it'll be in the podcast description, but I'm there. I'm extremely available. I love reaching out and networking. So please do.
Yeah, so Tzippora is very welcoming, guys. So please feel free. Please feel free to go on her LinkedIn, to go on the website, send her. She's very open to discuss and to talk about women, about her business, about social enterprise. I can see and I can feel your passion for. And I believe that Fix the Chain is going to go off the chart and it's something that's going to be recreated all over because it's something that we needed and people are waking up to it. And it's really about growing the communities. It's really about making an impact that will sustain, that will stay, that will take people out of poverty. And I'm so glad that you decided to say yes to this, to say yes and start. Sometimes people think that it's not going to be worth it, but if you start, there's people who are looking and they appreciate your work. And I'm actually inspired by the work that you have done so far. It's actually really commendable.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited that you're helping me share. And I mean, it's this collaboration, what I do is it only goes so far. So thank you. Thank you for helping get the word out and letting people know. And
yeah.
Best of luck to us all.
Yes, you're most welcome. So guys, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to subscribe, to share this episode to all of your contacts, to like. Also on Spotify, you get the chance to also comment on the webs of what you thought about the episode. So please leave a comment and I will see you next time.